All right. Welcome to chapter 72 of the Strength Culture Presents Quantum Lifting podcast. And today we've got a very special guest. He's probably considered someone we look up to in the industry. It's Chad Wesley Smith with us. So all the way from Orange County, correct?
Yeah, Southern California, Orange County. So thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming on. So yeah, if you could just give yourself a quick introduction of who you are, what you do, and why you're obviously such a role model to us all the way in Melbourne.
So I am the founder, president, CEO, something like that, of Juggernaut Training Systems. We're in our 11th year of business. Started out as a sport performance gym here in Orange County, which is, for the Australians listening, that's halfway between LA and San Diego. I know it's probably all kind of the same when you're that far away. But so I did that, competed in powerlifting, best total of 1,055 kilos, which was done not too far from you all at a Pro Raw 7 over there in Frankston at PTC headquarters. So that was 440 kilo squat. I think I maybe only benched 240 there, but I had a best bench of 257 and deadlifted 370 in the super heavyweight category. I got to compete in Australia several times, 3 Pro Raws and GPA Worlds back in 2014. So really enjoyed things over there. I got to do a bunch of seminars, meet a lot of awesome people in the powerlifting world there. Also competed as professional strongman, and prior to that, in track and field, was a collegiate national champion, as well as coaching powerlifting with getting to coach many of the best raw lifters in the world. Marissa Inda, Andy Huang, Brandon Allen, Steve Gentili, Kristen Dunsmore, list kind of goes on there. I think I coached 11 lifters with over 500 Wilks, Coach Gwen Johnston. So yeah, two guys squat over 455 kilos, which may be the only person to have 2 of those raw, to my credit. So yeah, that's kind of the quick
long list.
That was a big list of accolades, so really appreciate that. But I guess that's also what makes you quite interesting, is because you, as you mentioned, you've done shot put, powerlifting, you've worked with S&C, football players in America, and jiu-jitsu. You've got this spread across so many different sports, which makes, I think, your input so interesting. Whereas like someone like myself, I'm quite still very just focused around powerlifting. So I love that you've had such a big influence in a lot of sports.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this year I went back to doing some NFL combine coaching, so getting college guys ready for their big NFL tryout. I had the good fortune to work with Joe Burrow, who was the #1 overall pick in the draft this year. But even when I started with that, the group that we were with, I had a relationship with our speed coach, great coach by the name of Les Spellman Performance. But the position coaches, Jordan Palmer, TJ Hushmanzada, both former NFL players, were kind of like, why is this powerlifter helping us with the football players? So that was sort of fun, I guess, to be able to show them why and explain, like, as a sport performance coach, before I was a powerlifter, I was a sport performance coach after I was a powerlifter, and after I was a powerlifting coach. Like that is really my background, was track and field and sport performance. The powerlifting came later, and in a lot of ways is sort of the simple version of a lot of that stuff, because it's just really one quality that's getting trained. So that's something I've been very fortunate to get exposed to so many different coaches. First in the world of track and field since I was a kid. I started in track when I was 8 years old, but even through high school and college, I was writing my own physical preparation program for a lot of that, and was just always very forthright in going to talk to other coaches. And I say talk to, I mean annoy college coaches until they told me to go away and stop asking them questions. But you know, as soon as I started getting recruited in college, 16, 17 years old, a lot of guys wanted to hang out with the other people on the team on their visits and, you know, go party or whatever. And like, I kind of wanted to just ask the coach more and more questions. So I
Pick the brains.
how to make my training better. And track and field, you know, fortunately is probably the most advanced sport when it comes to performance, because it is pure output. And if you want to make someone faster, well, you go to the fastest people. So, yeah, and I was not just limited to talking with throws coaches who are, you know, certainly developing some of the most powerful athletes in the world, but also had a lot of involvement with sprint coaches. Our head coach in college was a bronze medalist in the decathlon, so he had, you know, a little bit of everything knowledge to share. So getting to work with, you know, track and field coaches, had this great opportunity to host UK athletics, like British national senior and junior teams. My last year of college and then first 3 years of Juggernaut, they were bringing over Christina Hubergu, who was a gold medalist in the 400, European champion in the hurdles, one of Europe's best 100-meter runners, all these great athletes, Dwayne Chambers, and getting to talk to them, talk to their coaches. And like, you know, the first year I interacted with Dwayne, he'd just run 6:42 in the 60, which was the third fastest time ever. So I was, you know, I was a senior in college then and didn't have a ton of class to go to, kind of just trained and hung out and would watch their whole practice and see how that really worked. But that's something I would really encourage any coach, and particularly I think powerlifting coaches and power lifters tend to get sort of caught in their little sphere of influence is very narrow, that, you know, they might not even be branching out to weightlifting coaches, but, you know, if you're a powerlifting coach or whatever, you know, talk to some weightlifting coaches, talk to some PTs, talk to some sport performance coaches, gain understanding of the principles that guide successful training, and then understand how to apply them to the sport.
Yeah. I am
100%.
I don't know if it was a video on your early days or whether or not you spoke about it, but you spoke about traveling to Joe DeFranco's gym and like road tripping there or something, and like you just stopped off and went through that. Was that around that time as well, or is that when you just started powerlifting?
So the first time I went to Joe DeFranco's was summer going into my senior year of college. So the summer of 2008, my brother lives in New York, works in finance there. So I was visiting him, I guess shortly, would have gone out there with one of my buddies for my birthday, for my 22nd birthday. And one of the days when my brother was at work, I rented a car, drove from New York to New Jersey on road trip. And it's not that far of a drive, but road trip wouldn't do it justice anyways, as religious pilgrimage would be the more accurate term for me then.
Yeah.
And this was, I guess, in the very early days of YouTube, and I was kind of like filming myself while I drove out there, and the video it's still on YouTube. It's called like My Trip to DeFranco's, but it doesn't have any sound now because the copyright of the audio on it. But you know, drove out there and I'd contacted, you know, just emailed him before, and this is like paying for a personal training session. So, you know, and I've interacted with Joe a lot since then, so get his perspective of the story. But he's kind of thinking like, oh, fuck, you know, it's just like another personal training session, some like random fanboy that wants to come out here and lift. And then I get there and I think I squatted like 590 for a double or something like that. And at that point he's like, oh, well, okay, like this is something a little bit different than our normal visitors. But he was, you know, DeFranco's is my biggest inspiration in starting Juggernaut. You know, I was watching all of his YouTube videos, reading every article he had the Strong DVD and the combine preparation and all that stuff, going back to 2005, 2006.
When the blogs, when the blogs were the weekly blog or monthly blog.
Yeah. And yeah, I kind of missed that time of the internet where there was like people put out one article a week. Elite FTS was the same way. when they used to only have articles on Friday, and be 4 or 5 articles every Friday, and I'd be waiting, like, like someone standing in line outside the Apple store for a new iPhone. I was like, just waiting for these new articles. And now everything is like 5 new articles a day, and there's so much less standard, I think, for who produces them in a lot of cases. But so Joe was just like a great influence to me, to see someone who had this, this hardcore warehouse gym and worked with athletes and football players and fighters. And I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. So a year later, started Juggernaut in our own version of that here in Southern California. And it was just such a different time in the world of strength culture, where we only did sport performance coaching, because if you wanted to have a powerlifting gym in 2009 when we started, or a weightlifting gym, that just didn't exist. CrossFit, had not been prevalent enough yet to really to grow people's interest in those fields. And it was a much more combative relationship with CrossFit in the early days, because if people were beginners to CrossFit, they were all in on the Kool-Aid on that, but not to the point yet where they're like, well, I kind of only like this part of it, or I only kind of like this part of it. And really that cultural shift, and I have no problem crediting CrossFit for all of this. That's the reason that I've gotten to travel to Australia to teach seminars, and go to England, and go to Ireland, and go all across the United States, and have people be interested in learning how to squat, bench, and deadlift, because whether directly or tangentially, they found out about it through CrossFit. So that was a cool thing. But yeah, so as we started with this, our hardcore warehouse gym, I definitely did get to find out a lot of things too, that it's not just all coaching badass athletes and making YouTube videos about it. There's also accounting and cleaning bathrooms and doing all the other bullshit that comes along with it too. But yeah, a lot of fun, and Joe was a great influence there, and it's been a lot of fun, in 3 or 4 subsequent trips since then, to get to reconnect with him, have him on my podcast, be on his podcast, be much more peers than we were in our first interaction.
I think he's a figurehead in a lot of our, everyone in the industry, particularly in the strength side of the industry. I think if you haven't waited to see what Joe's next product is, or look at his next Instagram or YouTube channel or whatever is popping up with him, he's one of the OGs for sure.
Definitely.
I was going to say, I was actually, you mentioned the comp before, Pro Raw 7. I was actually at that comp, and I saw you lift. And that was when I was still very new to powerlifting. That was probably about the time when and I've always just remembered watching you lift at that comp. So I feel like
this
it's a bit of a sense. I swear I saw you lift at Pro Raw.
Did you do a Pro Raw?
Maybe I did Pro Raw. I did Pro Raw. Maybe I did Pro Raw 6. I did Pro Raw.
Was at the Arnold's.
And and I did it with no belt.
I can't remember those details, but I just remember it was at the Arnold's. It was in Melbourne, and
that was the third Australia competition I did, second Pro Raw. I don't remember if I might have my numbers off. I think I did 7 and 8, but I might have done 6 and 7.
Didn't you just fly in and lift? You weren't meant to lift or something?
Yeah. So, well, I originally was planning on lifting, and then it would have been November 2015. Yeah, November 2015, I did Pro Raw, I think Pro Raw 7. Made my total PR there, 1,055 kilos, and didn't really have a great meet. I think I went 1, 2, 5 for 8 to make that. So it was like, man, I was so close to doing so much better. I had a 450 kilo squat that I stood up with and lost my balance and took a step backwards before the rack command. So I was missed that because of a technicality, and was bench bad for what I'd done in training. So like, I'm going to turn around and do another meet, right away. So it was LA Fit Expo here was like 10 weeks later in Los Angeles, and I started training for that. And then, you don't come out of a powerlifting meet, really any powerlifting meet, but especially not ones where you're taking 450 kilo squat attempts. healthy. You might not be hurt, but you're not healthy. So I come out of that, and a couple good weeks of training, and then shit just starts hurting. And so, all right, no Fit Expo. And I think I was already had told Imad Marcos that I'd come and do the Pro Raw. I was like, I'm just not, I haven't been training hard, because whenever I'd go through these cycles of training great and getting really strong, and then I'd turn around trying to do another meet really fast and kind of get beat up, and I'd be like, fuck powerlifting, I don't want to lift anymore. So in that time from about January 1, let's say, until Pro Raw, which would have been the middle of March, I hadn't been training for powerlifting. I'd been doing just like a very general off-season training, lost some weight, doing hill sprints and box jumps and some weightlifting and some strongman and just kind of whatever seemed interesting. And but I'd already also booked these seminars to come over and teach around Pro Raw. So I showed up without the intention to compete. And in doing that, I mean, I only had my lifting shoes with me. I didn't bring a belt. I didn't bring knee wraps. I didn't bring a singlet.
Yeah.
I didn't bring anything because I was like, I'm not in shape to lift. I'm not going to do it. I know that they're going to ask, but no, don't do it. But anyways, then they asked, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. But I was like, I can't squat in knee wraps because I haven't squatted anything over 700 in 10 weeks or 320 kilos. So I was like, I'll do it, but no belt, no knee wraps, anything. And it was one of the more fun meets I ever had because it was just total no pressure, go in and have fun. And I lifted, I think, 955 kilo total, like 350, 240, 365. And the 365 with no belt, it was only 5 kilos off my best ever. It tied my best deadlift ever, and did it with no belt. And it was to beat Gwaine on body weight, which is one of the few times in my life I've ever won something by being a lighter. I'm still giving him a hard time about that now, but yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Sounds like it. Can we expect you to power lift again, or are you done with powerlifting?
I'd be pretty surprised. As far as trying to compete at the highest level of powerlifting again, yes, there's no chance that I do that again. The possibility of doing another powerlifting meet, I wouldn't rule that out. Actually, last year, almost 2 years ago now, when I started losing a bunch of weight, that was with the intention of doing another powerlifting meet as a 140. So I'd gotten, probably 2-3 months back into pretty hard powerlifting training, which was my first time like lifting with the intention of lifting as heavy as I could in about 18 months at the time. So it was back, I think I squatted 335 for a double, no belts or anything. And I was going to do the meet again, no belt, no knee wraps, nothing. So I was back to squatting, 350-ish range, benching 240, 245, deadlifting 350 type of numbers. And this was about 6 weeks out from the meet. And I got a umbilical hernia, maybe from trying to lift really heavy with no belt, maybe from, ramping up my training too fast after 18 months of not training hard. I was also training jiu-jitsu alongside this, and had lost at that point about, I think when I started training for that meet, I was just over 160, and I wanted to lift as a 140. At the time when I got hurt, I was to about 147. So it's not totally out of the question that if I'm, lifting for fun, health, jiu-jitsu performance, whatever I train for now, I'm not really sure sometimes. But if I'm pretty strong, I'm like, all right, that sounds fun, and there's a meet in a month or 6 weeks, it's like, let's ramp up a little bit and do it. I'd say that's less likely now than it was a year and a half or 2 years ago, as I added umbilical hernia to my list of injuries. But but yeah, I'd say it's probably a long shot. I tell Marissa she's got to be the strong one for us now. Now she's, instead of just being the looks and the brains, now she's the brawn, the looks, and the brains.
Got it all.
Something else, I don't know.
Got it all.
Nice. So I guess the jiu-jitsu as well, I find quite interesting. I find you, from the external looking in, I find you seem like someone that just enjoys different sporting endeavors. You've dipped your hand in athletics, you've done powerlifting, done some weightlifting, and now like you're pushing the jiu-jitsu quite hard. Is that something? And you've done a couple of comps with that, I believe, as well.
Yeah, I was third at third at Worlds last year, blue belt ultimately. So it's like, third place of the fourth tier of guys, but the belts are largely controlled just by time as well. So
yeah. Well, is a black belt something you look to push to try and get?
Yeah, I mean that's probably 5 or 6 years away. Even since last year, I'm definitely not. Well, the start of this year derailed any jiu-jitsu plans I had, as in back-to-back weeks. You can see this is as straight as this pinky goes. I dislocated this pinky, ruptured the tendon in it. The next weekend had a match with Nsima Inyang, and in that I ruptured a tendon in this thumb. And I had to have surgery and a pin put in that. So I was out for a while with that, and then COVID happened. So our school was closed and everything. So I hadn't trained jiu-jitsu from about the first week of February until end of May, probably around about that. So I haven't been training very, very hard this year because of those extenuating circumstances. But yeah, I'll still compete in jiu-jitsu, but probably where before I was competing all adult. Masters for jiu-jitsu starts at 30. I will probably just compete with masters and stuff now, and just have fun doing it. Where all in on track, or all in on powerlifting, or all in on strongman. I'm more all in on being a hobbyist at things now, and just doing what sounds fun and enjoying the day-to-day of it, rather than like, all right, we've got to push for this competition. Because when I was getting into that last summer, training for Worlds in jiu-jitsu, I was doing jiu-jitsu 6 days a week. I was lifting for jiu-jitsu, doing extra conditioning, and like if Marissa wanted to go for a walk or something on Sunday, my day off of training, I was like, everything fucking hurts. Like it hurts in a different way than it did in powerlifting, but it all hurts. So yeah, I just kind of want to have fun with it now. But jiu-jitsu has been great. Those were some of the first in a big population that I got to train in the early days of Juggernaut. At one point, I had about 15 black belts that I was coaching their strength and conditioning. Guys like Hamalu Bahal, who's the 6-time world champion. A then young Felipe Pena, who's now regarded by many as the best jiu-jitsu in the world. Guys were traveling from Europe, traveling from Brazil for camp before Worlds and Pan Ams for the last month, and they were always telling me, "Oh, come on, Shed, you gotta train, you're gonna smash everybody." And I didn't want to risk hurting my wrist or my elbow or my shoulder and messing up my lifting. At the time, this was like 2010, 11, and 12. So probably the most into powerlifting I ever was. And then in 2012 was strongman. So I didn't want to risk it then, but come 2017, I was knew that I at least had put powerlifting aside for a time, but wasn't really training anything very actively. Was maybe lifting like once or twice a week, but still weighed as much as when I was powerlifting, so that wasn't great. And just needed a new challenge. So I was like, yeah, let me give those guys a call and see if I really can smash everybody. But it's been a lot of fun because it's just so different, Yeah, it helps to be strong, certainly, but that first day I walked in there, 165 kilos, just not in shape very much at all. And I don't have a wrestling background or anything. So just the first day when I'm gassing out on the warm up, I was like, all right, this is a whole new deal. And until I think it's hard to understand until you do it, that you get someone who, for me may have been half my weight, 80 kilos, but 80 kilo brown belt or black belt or something, who's just so clever and flexible. And it's like, I'm getting my ass kicked by this guy at half my size. That as humbling and almost humiliating as that can be, it can also be this great motivational tool to be like, how to stop this from happening. So I've been, two and a half years in on that. Get to train with a lot of great people. It's such a awesome community. Where I've trained with guys from Australia who are here to visit. I've trained in Ireland. I've trained all across the United States. That there's always, especially for the school that I'm a part of, Gracie Baja, they got 850 worldwide. I think so. It's like wherever we go for seminars or vacation or whatever, I find a place to train. Take my gi, whatever, and there's like an instant community there. So it's been a lot of fun.
How long did your body and energy systems and everything take to transition to a point where you felt at least comfortable doing a completely different sport?
Maybe almost a year, 9 months to a year, I'd say. And I guess I'm not quite sure how to quantify completely comfortable in this, because I don't even know that I'm completely comfortable now. I don't know if anyone that does jiu-jitsu is completely comfortable, but the start of things was tough. Like my adductors and my hips and my low back were really bugging me. I've got some disc issues from powerlifting, and to take those disc issues that exist when I am everything braced and set just perfect how I want it to be, to then go into this world of deep flexion and rotation, under flexion, and moving so much more dynamically and through so many different movement patterns. It was tough for sure. And yeah, my low back and hips and everything was really having a tough time for a while. And I just had to be smart about, let's do a little bit, these first while we're just going to train 2 days a week, and then, add in a third day every other week kind of thing. And just trying to be smart about that, but also, as someone who's competitive and everything, it's often easier to give that advice than to take it.
Definitely.
100%. Now, I was just that you mentioned that the first people you trained were like MMA and jiu-jitsu fighters, but when you opened up your gym, you actually had 0 clients.
Correct.
And you were cold calling to find clients. How was that? Just ringing random places and trying to get people to, hey, come do some S&C with me.
Yeah. So when we first opened, I'd been coaching high school football for 3 years, football and track, but we opened in the fall, so it was football season. Those kids weren't going to be coming to train. So yeah, when we started, we literally had like 0 clients. I grew up in the area, so I had relationships with some high schools around there, and I'd finished college at a small school right in that area, as well as the guy I started during it with, Nate Winkler. So we went and like presented to all the coaches there, because they didn't have strength and conditioning program or a good weight room or anything at the school. So that's where we first started to get some clients, was from that school. But we're also just cold calling places like jiu-jitsu schools. But the first place that we ever cold called and then actually went and talked to the guy was OC, Orange County Muay Thai. And walk in, like our first sales call kind of thing, just wide-eyed, innocent fools. And this may have been before I think before we were actually open. And we get in there and kind of give our little spiel to the guy, and he just starts like ripping us, like, well, but that's not going to help with Muay Thai, and this isn't going to help. And he was just a dick. Besides that, like, I don't remember the conversation verbatim, but like, he did not understand what we were talking about from a strength and conditioning standpoint. I think he wanted to, think that he was in Bangkok and was just going to, go on jogs and kick bamboo and be great at Muay Thai. I was like, no, we can help you, generate some more power and have better endurance and so on and so forth. But anyways, he's not hearing it, and it's almost like he invited us there because he was having a bad day, and he's like, "Fuck these guys, I'm gonna shit on them for 15 minutes." So I remember when Nate and I walk out of there and like stand in the parking lot and look at each other, just like, "Is this about to be what this is like? Like, is this how this whole thing is gonna go?" Mind you, that this is also 2009, like financial crisis, recession, everything, which at the time, a lot of people would say to us, "Oh, that's really brave for you guys are opening a business during a recession." And I was like, I just came out of college, and I just throw the shot put and lift weights. Like, I don't watch the fucking news. Like, what's that? Like, I guess ignorance is bliss, maybe in that situation. But the next guy that we called, a gentleman by the name of Fabio Vilela, and he's like, "Oh yeah, come on down," And so I walk into his jiu-jitsu school. I knew what jiu-jitsu was. Like, I had watched enough, UFC and YouTube videos to like understand these are the demands of this sport, and that's something I think is a really useful thing for strength and conditioning coaches. You have to be able to do these needs assessments, and you don't have to have done the sport. Does it offer some unique perspective? Certainly, but at least can watch it, see how they move, how far, how long, how fast, all that stuff. But so walk into this place, Gigante Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm greeted by 6'7", 250-pound black belt Fabio Vilela, and start telling him, I think we could help you out this way, that way, and it's like, if like, come and I'll train you for free, and if you like it, tell your students, tell your friends. He comes 2 weeks later, he's got 2 other black belts with him. 6 weeks later, 2 more, and it was awesome. He was just such a great advocate for us. And then I would be at these jiu-jitsu competitions, back in 2009, 10, and I walk in and goes, "Oh, it's the Juggernaut." I said, "Juggernaut. Oh, Coach Shed, come on. Oh, Juggernaut, let's go." And even when I started doing jiu-jitsu, the first day, our professor, so our head coach at Grace Baja headquarters here in Irvine, is a guy named Felipe de la Monica. And I worked with Felipe as his strength and conditioning coach for 3 years. And he coaches as like Rafael Dos Anjos, TJ Dillashaw, Cub Swanson. So he's like a big deal. Fourth degree black belt. He's only 35 years old, and that's about pretty much as young as you could be to have your 4th degree black belt. And we're going through the line at the end, bowing, shaking hands at the end of class, and he's like, "Oh, Coach Chad, great for thank you for coming." And I could see like all these other people, first day 1, white belt, fat guy, and like, "Coach Chad,
Yeah.
why is the professor calling this guy coach?" But yeah, just a really great community of people. And as I look back on that group that we had, now having the perspective of training jiu-jitsu, not just training with some of those guys, and seeing how incredibly talented and just vicious they are, and like these 180-pound dudes. I'm like, "Do you have some like special gravity switch that you're turning up when you get on top of me? Because you sure as shit don't weigh 180 pounds." As they like vacuum seal themselves onto you. But yeah, just have this whole new perspective on like, wow, those guys were just grinding, because they would all train. They all ran their own schools all around Southern California, and some of them were driving 2 hours for them to train jiu-jitsu together, and then straight from jiu-jitsu to come and lift with me, and then then they'd go teach, and then they train again, and they train jiu-jitsu again, and sometimes do their own extra running and all this stuff. Guys doing 16, 18 training sessions a week, all in between everything. And I'm here like, man, 6 days jiu-jitsu and 3 days lifting. Like I am dying. Those guys are just incredible work ethic and, a huge passion certainly for what they do.
Obviously, like training methods and methodology progresses over time and stuff. But were you current, like in the last couple of years, doing a lot of the similar things that you were prescribing back then, or
No, I had those guys do like way too many circuits and stuff like that back then, which I'd see a lot of stuff from things I still think. I read like Training for Warriors and stuff like that, and we did too much conditioning work there, and it's like they didn't need more conditioning. They already condition hard. They're training jiu-jitsu 10 times a week. So my understanding of like corrective exercise and that stuff was way too limited at the time. So we would have been a lot more on that. More strength work, though we did do a lot of that, and just a simpler periodization structure would have been totally appropriate for them. And then I think if I had trained jiu-jitsu a couple times with them back then, but I should have maybe gotten a little bit deeper into that of once or twice a week training for a couple months to just understand more about being able to advise them on like this, trying to create like a high, low, medium type of structure to their week. Like, hey, on Mondays, let's make your jiu-jitsu training more based around live training. And on Tuesdays, let's make a light day that's more drilling. And Wednesdays, more specific training for a moderate day. Because a lot of times those guys, it's hard all the time. They just get a bunch of tough guys in the room and beat the shit out of each other. And that's how we get good, which, is pretty effective. But that's a little bit more of like a Bulgarian system for weightlifting applied to jiu-jitsu. Let's just go as hard as we can and see who comes out the other side. But yeah, I think we did way too much conditioning with those guys back then, which made for some really fun, intense training environments because it was so competitive with a dozen black belts and watching them trying to beat each other in these different kind of strongman style medleys and all that sort of stuff, but not.
Nice.
I think we just cut the audio. No, it's all good. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about, so obviously the decision to actually end up shutting the gym early on and progress to a more online based, coaching strategy. At what point did you start to realize, oh, hang on, I probably am better off going online rather than keeping the gym open, the physical gym open?
So we opened September 2009, and I graduated college in May 2009. We wrote a business plan in June 2009, had an investor in July 2009, keys to a warehouse August, open September. So it was a very whirlwind kind of process, and it was going pretty well. Like we were breaking even after 5 months, and progressing and we're up to a point where we had several hundred clients through some different team training deals and everything. But I wrote the first Juggernaut Method ebook, wrote that and released it in December 2010. So shortly after that, I got to be in Muscle and Fitness, and the book was selling a lot. And I was like, man, this is like pretty cool, but I'm also taking a lot of this money I'm making from the book and paying for our rent and everything. Orange County, Southern California is not a cheap place. So we were, $6,000 a month rent on our place. So it was in that early 2011, a couple months after the book had come out, that I was like, there's like 5,000 people that have bought this book. And I said, we're never going to have more than 200, 250 members here at the gym. I said, and I don't have to pay rent to sell this book. So that was like the first kind of inkling that there's just I could reach so many more people. And at that point I was writing a lot, probably article a week, article every other week kind of thing for my own site for Elite FTS and doing that. And then later in 2011, the guy I started Juggernaut with decided that, you know, he wanted to move back home to North Carolina, so total other side of the country, be closer to his family, do all that. And you know, it was all very good friends and everything. But when he made that decision, I did have the great fortune to then employ James Smith, the thinker, for the next year after Nate had moved away. And that year was the time that I learned the most about training that I've ever learned. Probably that was like beyond a master's course, certainly. Just watch James and have conversations with him every day. But when our lease was up, then in September 2012, a 3-year lease, I was like, you know, this is just a good time to make a transition. So at that point, I moved out of the facility we'd been in. I just started subleasing space at another gym for me to only coach football players, as that had become kind of my niche of getting these high school guys and getting them ready for college. In 2 years, I think I had 30 Division I players, a couple guys who are in the NFL now. And also at that point, I was like, we're going all in on creating content, writing ebooks, all that stuff. So started assembling like Team Juggernaut, my own staff of writers. We parted ways with Elite FTS at that point. So I was like, all right, I got to put these training logs somewhere and do all that. So I might as well, you know, make my own team and do that. So in September 2012, our website, jtsstrength.com, I think, so this is like our first month of like, all right, let's write articles, let's do this. Maybe 25,000 unique visits. And then a year later, September 2013, it would have been 250,000 unique visits in that month. So 10x growth in that year. And that was all just like purely organic growth from writing articles that people were interested in and they found valuable. Certainly some of it was that we were the only people in the powerlifting space who were like, hey, West Side isn't the greatest thing ever, and here's why. And also, you know, chiming in with some stuff like geared powerlifting is kind of weird and dumb, but you know, so we were the first people to say that, and that certainly created quite an uproar. And it was just still a much smaller community. When I did my first powerlifting meet, October 2010, it was the first ever USPA meet, which I'm not sure what your guys' affiliation would be out there. I know GPA is like the thing there, but so this IPL is their international, but USPA is the second biggest federation in the US after USAPL, our IPF affiliate, and it's got, you know, 15,000 members. Well, and you could drive, you know, pre-COVID, you could drive an hour or two from my house any weekend and find a USPA meet with 90 lifters, 120 lifters, 200 lifters every single weekend, and maybe more than one. And that first meet I did was 32 lifters in a high school gym. You know, it was the first powerlifting meet I'd ever been to, and that's 10 years ago. But from that time, late 2010 into 2012, 2013, it was way smaller than it is now. So it was much different to be this big voice in this very small community where, you know, I think we still have a big voice, but it's so much bigger and more spread out. That was just a interesting, you know, a fun, stressful, exciting time. Also in that time, I got to help people like Brandon Lilly, you know, create the Cube Method and turn that into an ebook, and then make Juggernaut Method 2 and all sort of stuff like that. So, you know, we were making a great business out of it, I think. And then I went back into having a gym in 2015, which there's a longer story to that I won't get into. That it wasn't really my intention, but whatever, it happened. It happened. But there was someone else who was supposed to come and run the day-to-day of that, and didn't happen, and I was kind of left on the hook. Like, well, I guess we're doing this, even though this isn't what I wanted to do. But so did that just through the term of the lease, and that still had some great benefits to it, because it opened the door for Max Ada to join the company and for us to really grow in the weightlifting side of things. But once that lease was up, I was like, yes, back to the internet for me. Where we get to reach so many more people, lower overhead, more freedom of time and financially for myself. So, my garage right now is Juggernaut HQ, and it just, especially during the pandemic, as so many places have been closed. I've had Olympian for Greece, a Greek national record holder in the shot put, who I coach, was here training. Multiple U.S. Olympians in the bobsled, multiple NFL players. Marissa, IPF world champion, 5-time national champion powerlifting. I was here bringing up the rear of our training group with the relatively unimpressive weights I lift these days. But I just really enjoy that a lot more, doing the content, getting to travel. So yeah, that's kind of that story.
How did you go handling, even on just like a personal level, like handling that much growth of the brand to the point where I would say probably at the time, definitely the biggest voice in the world, in like, even if it is a small niche, but you guys are, and probably still are, number one. Like I put Renaissance periodization in there as well now, probably. But like, how'd you go with that journey over like a 12-month period where it just sort of like,
thank you first off, but well, just kind of went, like there wasn't a perspective. Like I remember thinking about this a lot at the time, when we'd always be looking at our web traffic and stuff, that we were so close to it that when we got to 250,000, all I was thinking was, well, why don't we have 350,000? Like our articles are so good, like we should have more, we should have more. And didn't have the perspective of, well, we used to only have 25,000. I was just in the moment, well, we should have more. We should be doing better than we are, even though we were doing very, very well. And, I guess the other perspective on it is like, my degree is in history. I intentionally didn't get something in the strength and conditioning field, kinesiology, whatever, because I didn't think that the school that I went to taught it well. So I didn't want to bother with that. So I was just learning. I'd been writing my own program since I was 14, and always been reading everything I could. And especially once I got into college, I think probably when I was 19 is when I took another, step of interest and stuff. And this is like 2005. Information was more prevalent on the internet, but still very limited, certainly compared to now. But was buying Super Training and Science and Practice of Strength Training, and reading that stuff and talking to coaches and going to seminars. And as I just continued to learn that stuff, so that's where like my training knowledge came from. But the business knowledge kind of things, neither Super Training nor my history degree prepared me for any of that. And that's why I always joke that, we wrote what I thought was a business plan in 2009, because that's when we were like Googling how to write a business plan and going from there. But it was not a plan, because we just didn't know what was ahead. And so much of this has been make decisions in the moment, go with what my instinct seems good, seems like the right decision, or what would be appealing to me. And that's what has guided a lot of the decision processes. What would I like? And I try to do a better job now of, rather than be like, all right, what is 34-year-old Chad, who's been involved at this at the deepest levels, interested in? But let's try and think back to what 20-year-old Chad, who was just kind of starting to figure it out, would be interested in, and getting more people's perspective and other experts and all that. But so to answer your question of like, how did I manage that? I didn't. I just did it. We just did it and kept thinking it should be better. we should have more people. And early in that process, I came to understand two things. The first, which continues to be our our kind of guiding light, is how can we help people reach their goals? What content can we create? Video can we make? Book can we write? Program can we create that's going to help our readers, our viewers, better reach their goals? Because that's what I needed. That's the information that I needed when I was 14 years old and started writing my own program, is easily digestible information that provides value. So that was the most important thing, and I understood that even in late 2012, probably when we were first starting to ramp up articles a lot. And then as I added these other writers, something I kept advising them on is the reader doesn't care how strong you are, they care how strong you can make them. So we had these really renowned powerlifters, writing articles for us, and something I always said back then too is there are internet coaches and there are coaches who put stuff on the internet. And I would see, especially 2012, 13, 14, a lot of internet coaches, people with very prominent names still in the industry. And I'd see them and I was like, this is fucking bullshit. Like this guy's never lifted heavy. He's never coached anyone. Like, why are people listening? Because he's a good writer. And not that you can't have good information, but in a lot of those cases, I don't think they did. So I was like, we're never going to be like that and just, sell out or whatever. We're going to get these real coaches and have them tell us what's really going on in their athletes training or in their training. So we always wanted to be coaches who put stuff on the internet rather than internet coaches. So I think that was really important to the authenticity of our information as well. But as long as we stuck with that, it's all about how can we create valuable content that's going to help people reach their goals, and to not make it about the writer or the content creator, in this case, but what of our knowledge can we share with people? That's really been important.
Yeah,
definitely. I was going to say, you said that you wanted to give people content that you wish you had when you were younger, and the principles of strength training for us is like the Bible for us at the gym. And anyone that comes into contact, anyone I come into contact with that's a new coach, will go read that book, go read that book. And that has just laid the foundation for my strength training so much. So I have to thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
So you've done your job. You've definitely done your job, what you set out to do. But yeah, that is just top quality information. It's easily digestible and just makes everything so understandable. Yeah, it's really awesome. The thing I want to ask is, obviously, so you've gone from the gym online, and now you're going to this AI, artificial intelligence, chatbot. Where did the idea for that come from? And how is that going along currently as we speak?
So that first came about with our co-creator, Garrett Blevins, probably approached me with this in late 2017, early 2018. And he was working on it for his own coaching logic, and I think was talking to me and talking to a couple other companies about trying to partner with them with people who had a bigger reach than him, basically. So he was showing me this stuff, and I was like, wow, this is like really, really interesting. But at the time, I just had other stuff going on. I was like, that's cool, but I don't, it wasn't to the point where I was like, yes, let me jump in and spend hundreds of hours doing this. But it did kind of, put a seed in my head to think what he's doing, like what is needed to do that is every decision has to be principle based, rule based decision. And you can't just do something because, well, that's the way it's always been done, or that's what feels right, or whatever. Like, no, we have to be able to justify every decision through, a logical series. So that seed, plus as we created scientific principles and then really started talking a lot about these volume landmarks, MEV and MRV even more specifically, I would always get the question, I'd do all these seminars. I've probably done 250 seminars since I started those in 2011, maybe like 250 seminars all around the world. And I talk about, how to design programs as part of them. And in that, I'm always trying to be descriptive rather than prescriptive. So I'm trying to explain, these are the principles upon which this is based, and here are some examples of their application, rather than, 5x5 is the best way to do it. Or you need, this many sets of dynamic effort work, or, just throwing out examples here, guys, of not the way to do it. But so as I was always trying to be descriptive about it, describing what increased and decreased someone's MRV was a big part of things. So I'd say, all right, more experienced lifters, goes higher, bigger, male, female, better sleep, all this kind of stuff, and how those manipulated the volume landmarks. And then at the end of that lecture, the hands go up. So what is my MRV? Tell me the number, And so after getting asked, what is my MRV, or like how to find their specific number, as we refer to it, because we use just a number of sets within these given intensity ranges based on what phase you're on, phase you're in. So we're, all right, your MRV is 14 sets, whatever it is. After getting asked enough times, well, what is my number? I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out a way that combines the descriptive nature and, of educating them why it goes up, why it goes down, but actually can prescribe a number that is, the best estimate of what it is, because you're not really going to figure it out until trial and error. But if we can narrow down, your target from all available numbers to like, all right, my MRV is probably about 12 sets, and maybe it ends up being 11, maybe it ends up being 13 or 14, but now you can figure it out in 1 or 2 training cycles instead of 8 or 10. So those two ideas just sort of combined into creating this, like a scale of magnitude that had all the individual differences on it. So, all right, what is the difference, how much more volume do females need compared to males, or lightweight lifters compared to super heavyweights, and just created this magnitude scale for that, and started putting in test cases of my lifters and saying, okay, that looks like about the right number. Oh, maybe we're giving this too much weight and that not enough weight. But anyways, through that process, I got something, where I could create the two most impactful, I could know with great estimates, the two most impactful numbers to someone's training: their MEV, so the least amount of training they need to do to improve, and their MRV, the most amount of training they can probably tolerate. And so that dictated, that dictates now in the system, well, how much, where do they start and where are they aiming towards? And the relationship between those two numbers, their absolute values, the gap between them, can tell us things about, well, how much frequency should they probably do? What kind of periodization will best suit them? Can we make just these linear jumps between these numbers that have quite a bit of space, or is it more condensed and we need to be more strategic in their fatigue management with alternating periodization, or it's even closer and undulating periodization? And if they have, really high MRVs and these numbers that indicate they're more beginner, well, that means they're going to need more hypertrophy, or the numbers are closer, so that means they're more advanced, so they're going to need longer peaks relative to the hypertrophy. So it informs all of these decisions, and we just kept, cranking away at what turned into a great mental exercise for me as a coach, that every decision has to be justified, because the system can't use intuition. It can't take, like, oh, sometimes I like to do it like this and sometimes I like to do it like this. Well, why do sometimes I like to do it like that and sometimes I like to do it like that? Why does that occur? So we just kept working on it until every single decision about, volume, frequency, exercise selection, phasic structure, how we overloaded from week, the cycle proportion of phases was, and then we created it, started using it, and program. And it shouldn't exist. And I fully acknowledge that I contributed to this problem because I've written programs with names to them that are set, they're fixed. That's this many sets and this many reps. And if we look at all athletes in like a big bell curve of their needs, yes, some of these programs, 5x5, mad cow, fucking whatever, the juggernaut method, cube method, like, yes, a section of that bell curve is being served by that program because it is set, fixed sets and reps and a certain amount of volume and a certain amount of frequency and everything. But what we have is not a program, it is programming. It is adaptive to everyone, at any place in that, because it gives, 55 kilo females who have been lifting for 9 months, a different program, so different sets and reps than what it gives a 125 kilo male who's been lifting for 15 years. But it's all within the scientific principles of strength training, because that is what guides effective programming. Every effective program applies specificity and overload and fatigue management and SRA and variation and phase potentiation through the lens of individual differences. It is those individual differences that dictate the magnitude of the application. What does overload mean for 52 kilo inexperienced beginner female, or what does it mean for 125 kilo advanced experienced male? They all need it. They all need overload, but what does it mean for all of them? And that's what we've created, is that it has, through this extremely intricate process, creating individualized programs for those people, and then adjusting those programs daily, intra-session, session to session, week to week, month to month, based on their subjective fatigue ratings and then their performance. And that's something we're continuing to refine. Where soon we'll be rid of any subjectivity in that, because people will just be answering like a readiness questionnaire. I slept this much last night. I rate it has subjectivity within it, but the group of subjectivity kind of gives more objectivity at the end. I slept this much. I rate my sleep as this quality. This is my motivation today, and I'm this sore in this area, this area, this area. There's your readiness score for the day. It adjusts the training based on that. You rate at the end of the session how hard it was. It looks at your performance, what kind of drops you had to make from set to set, whatever. And then combined with tomorrow's questionnaire, makes a new rating, and so on and so forth. So we're extremely proud of it. I love every day when, I scrolling through and see like 50 posts, hashtag chatbot posts, and PR this, PR that, and get to share those people and celebrate their success.
It's awesome.
It's an incredibly, I've made a couple of spreadsheets that can do a couple little things. I wouldn't even imagine of what the if statement or whatever it is to use that goes through this thing.
Some of them they're like paragraphs long. So one of the guys who uses it, his name is Dustin Perry. He's the head strength coach for the San Francisco 49ers. And I think that in it of itself is a great testament that someone at that level chooses to use this for his own training. And for full disclosure, he and I are friends, and I do consulting stuff for the 49ers, but it was the other order. He was using it already, and then hired me for the consulting, and we became friends from that. But he said when he got the first one, and this was 1.0, probably a year and change ago, that he's like, all right, he's like, I do a lot of Excel stuff. Let me get into this, and starts looking at the formulas, and then was immediately like, oh, holy shit, this is a little bit something different. So then gives it to like some of the IT guys for the 49ers, like, sort this out for me, and they're like,
No.
not going down that. That's way too hard. And the 2.0 is, immensely more complex than that. So, the app, Juggernaut AI app, like Great White Buffalo, just one of the most frustrating parts of my life and career. We had an app developer that we were working with, an Indian company, and they worked on it for a year. And they had stuff that made programs, but it just didn't work right. Like they just could not make it right. Could not make it create the correct program. So then we're like, all right, let's look at a US company for this, which also means it's like 5 times as expensive. We go and start talking to a couple of US companies. 2 companies just said, no, we're not even going to try and make this because it's too complicated. And then the third company said, yeah, we'll do it, $950,000. And that's, anyone who's dealt with that kind of stuff and estimates, $950,000 estimate probably means it's going to cost $1.5 million when it's all said and done. So I'm like, no thanks, we can't do that. Finally did find a developer who we worked with a lot, who's done a ton of work for Juggernaut, who was using the program himself, and had like a more intimate knowledge of it. I think it was just tough for a lot of app developers to understand. That they had to understand what powerlifting was to kind of get to the next steps. But Tim Arnold, who's doing it now, is doing an awesome job. We have a working prototype that many people in our team are using for their own training. So it is soon. It's coming very soon. It's so much better than what the Excel stuff does now, from the intricacy of the program that it creates, what it can track, how it can adjust training, how it can look at ratios of one exercise to another to determine either this person has relatively weak triceps compared to their pecs or their shoulders, because we have so much data now. We have 7,000 some people who have gone through it. So we just got a ton of like, well, what does it mean to have weak legs and a strong back? What is the real expectation of it? What do the better lifters have? What's their squat to deadlift ratio of heavyweights, of middleweights, of lightweights, of men, of women, of sumo, of conventional, of all this kind of stuff to be able to use this data to guide better decision making. We're also talking about integrating like velocity-based training into it to maybe eliminate all the subjectivity of RPE, where the velocity-based stuff would be creating individualized RPE tables, and for Jamie, we know that a 9 RPE lift means that the bar moved at this speed, and when the speed decreases from this to this to this, from rep to rep, that means he only had 1 left or 2 left or whatever it was. And that'll be something that's a little bit down the road, but we're just passionate about making this as effective as possible. Even right now, and definitely in the app, it is beyond what I can do as a person. I can't write a program as intricate as what it's doing now, and because, well, frankly, I don't care enough to track all of this data about someone, and I would even say that to Marissa. I don't care enough about your training to track these 5,000 numbers per week. And also the Chad bot, it doesn't get tired, it doesn't get hungry, it doesn't wake up on a Sunday morning when it's time to write programs and it's kind of hungover and like, oh, yeah, let's do this. And none of those things happen. It's always doing every calculation and every detail possible.
I love that honesty. That's unreal.
I admire, because what you just said then is sometimes my decision-making process too. It's like, oh, just do that. That'll work. Like, that's going to get the job done. And you almost feel guilty for not being 100% into writing a program, but you can't always be at that level. It's just not possible to. We're humans too, and stuff affects us, and we get hungover as well.
Maybe I could do it with one program. I could do it for her program, but I'm not going to do it with 3,000 programs per week. So,
No.
Are there any other competitors in the space? Is there anyone else out there with something similar?
I think that Sheco has got something similar to it. I haven't used it enough to really say. I know that the barrier of entry to that's quite a bit different, as you have to like enter in a month of your own training, and then it bases it off of that. I can't speak to how well it works or whatever. But beyond that, the people that are still, they're selling templates, and I laugh when I see company, hybrid or whatever. They're like, well, we, use one of our 16 different programs. And it's like 16. This is 9 fucking quadrillion programs, a 9 with 15 zeros. And that's just the first day.
Oh no, I think it's just cut out.
When you love to ask that, and they want me to tell them a number. They want 2 times a week, 3 times a week, whatever it is. I said, I can't tell you that. I refuse to tell you that, because it would do a disservice to the person asking, because as I answer the question to a group, you may have a different answer than him, and then her, and so on and so forth. And your answer today might be different than it is 6 months from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. And it might be different. It could be different when you're 16 weeks out versus 6 weeks out from a meet. But this takes all of that into account, and it keeps changing and keeps adapting, rather than just this day a week program where everyone, big, small, young, old, male, female, great sleep, shitty sleep, gaining weight, losing weight, they all do the same thing. But this adapts that for all of those and a lot more factors. So, my hope is that this is the death to templates and the death to the cookie cutter program, because people they deserve better than that, and they can get something that's totally individualized for them for the same price or even cheaper in some cases than people are selling this other stuff. Especially when you think about there are so many like one-on-one coaches out there that they have 5 templates, and every single one of their clients is on one of those 5, and in some of the cases I'm being generous by saying 5. So
yeah.
Would you say though, because obviously the thing with AI coaching, do you think people will miss that, having an actual coach, someone to talk to and have that sort of emotional?
Yeah, that's certainly an element of it. And can it replace one-on-one coaching? At this point, probably not. And it will never be able to replace like the emotional support, whatever, of a coach. But you're going to pay hundreds of dollars a month for that, rather than a couple dollars a day. And that's, people just have different needs when it comes. They have different budgets, and then they, or they have different needs, and they have different budgets to fulfill those needs. I never had a coach for powerlifting. I never had a handler at a meet. I had a different person wrap my knees at every single powerlifting meet I ever did. And one of the biggest reasons I was successful, yes, I have very good genetics. That's why I've been like an elite level in 4 different sports. But I'd show up to powerlifting meets, and I'd look at people and be like, that guy is stronger than me. Like, that guy is bigger and stronger than me. train with people who I knew were more talented, but they just did shitty programs. Like if you've got a very, very well designed program for you and you work hard at that program, you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
If you can put the, management of the day-to-day decisions and meet strategy and mindset, if you can do that well, then you can be a great lifter. So as far as managing those day-to-day decision type of things, I think what we're doing in terms of like the readiness questionnaires and stuff is going to be really effective for that. Because how many one-on-one coaches have daily interaction with their clients or intra-session interaction with their clients? Like in-person coaching, sure, but not online coaching. And I see it a little bit more in weightlifting than in powerlifting, that there's more resistance to the online coaching. They're like, oh, you need to get an in-person coach. And I'm like, a shitty in-person coach is not better than a great online coach. But so managing those small things will always be tough. But for what it is, I think it's unmatched.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's not trying to fill that need. That's not what it's there for. So it's We done, Charles?
Did you pause? Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah, I thought that was a question. We've touched on everything we wanted to touch on, and this conversation was definitely inspiring for both Jamie and I. Have looked up to you in the industry for quite some time. We thank you for coming.
I just want to say one last thing. On our wall at the gym, so we opened up in 2016, and on our wall, we've literally just got A4 pieces of paper printed out of the people that have inspired us to create strength culture. And you're up there.
Oh, thank you.
Like Mark Bell's on there, Eric Cressy. We've got some like NFL players, Tom Brady. We've got LeBron James, Steven Gerrard's up there. But the funny, we were looking up there. We were like, oh, who could we get on a guest on the podcast? And we were like, oh, we'll go to the wall. And then we're like, David Goggins. We can't call David Goggins. So we just like, oh, Chad might respond back. So we sent you a message, and then straight in, you're like, yeah, let's do it. So thank you for being approachable, man. Like this is for us, like the same thing. You went to DeFranco, like this is fucking cool. Like I think this is sick. It's 1:30 on a Wednesday morning, COVID aside, but what a fun chat. Thank you very much, man. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We do really appreciate it, man, because, it's been awesome. So I guess the last thing is, where can people find you if they don't already know who you are? Those rare few.
So at Chad Wesley Smith, at Juggernaut Training on Instagram, Juggernaut Training Systems YouTube. That's where most of our content goes these days. And jtsstrength.com, where you can find all of our backlog of articles and videos, online coaching, apparel, books, all that stuff.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, man.
Charlie, take care.